Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, along with Rudy Reyes. And Rudy, glad to have you back on the big show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate having me on. Look forward to some good conversation. A lot of stuff going on in the sports world right now.
Isn't that the truth? I'll tell you what, I'm going to hit, since tonight's theme here is going to be about great coaches and great players, we're going to lead off with that. Now, I know that we're talking a lot of baseball, but I like to use terminology called lead off because it's that time of the year. So with that said, Rudy, okay, Tim Duncan had an opportunity to take over for Greg Popovich yesterday, one game. Of course, he had Becky Hammond there with him. But what are your thoughts about whether or not great players can actually become great coaches?
Well, there's a lot of dynamics you really have to put in as part of the overall conversation. You know, would Kobe Bryant, would he have, God rest his soul, would he have been the best coach? Maybe, maybe not. We'll never know. There's been a lot of players that have tried to come in, especially in I'll use the Lakers organization as an example. Nobody can really compare to guys who have been there, done that. Phil Jackson did it with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. You know, but he didn't start off as this fantastic Hall of Fame player that's going to get in based on his numbers. No, he's going to get in as a coach because at a young age he realized and recognized that's what he wanted to do, and ultimately he has two hands worth of rings to show for that type of work. Was he a stellar player? Not necessarily. He wasn't the worst player either, but I think sometimes we can really over-exacerbate this conversation because of all of the players that have now turned into coaches. Tim Duncan being one of them. They won by 1 point, okay, against the team who's 21-4 in Charlotte Hornets. I'm not really convinced necessarily that the Spurs were going to go to any type of playoff situation. They're 26-34. They're not doing anywhere near as good as everybody had thought they would be with a Greg Popovich-led system. But of course, and hopefully, Coach Pop has got whatever situation he had to resolve without any further injury. But the fact that he left it to Tim Duncan, I probably would have flipped the script and left it to Becky. But that's just my observation.
Okay, I'm going to go over some names, Rudy, one at a time. And I'm talking about superstar players. And I want to stay with this, okay? So bear with me. Well, first of all, I'm going to lead off with Bill Russell. You know, we all know what he did with the Boston Celtics in the in the 60s, where he never finished any higher than second place. But his overall record as a coach, Rudy, was 341, 290, and 540 for a percentage. He was 17-41 with the Sacramento Kings in 87 and 88, and had about an average run with Seattle. My question to you, as it will be with the four other examples, are can great players make good or great coaches? I want to stay specialized in this area, Rudy. That's what I have other guys I want to bring out. Because the thing I often wonder about, will egos get in the way of their ability to convey their message that not all these guys are as good as they were? We'll lead off with Russell, Rudy.
Well, Bill Russell, as a coach, he was 60-21 to 66-67. He was okay there, but he won only four playoff games versus the 5. It doesn't look very good. I mean, the numbers are okay. I mean, guys like Red Auerbach, who's clearly a Hall of Famer, who's done it for over 20 years in the NBA. I think Bill Russell probably would have not made the best coach had he have stayed in the coaching realm, especially for the Celtics. When you look at what he did during 60 and 69, I mean, Bill Russell did everything he did what he could. Could he have done better? Probably. We'll never know, clearly, because of the amount of players, the type of players that they had. But Bill Russell's tenure wasn't very long, so I can't give him a lot of credit, and I really can't say that being the best player made him the best coach, because clearly 3 years worth of Celtics coaching didn't quite equalize the type of player he was.
Precisely my point, but the question I want to ask you again, Rude Dog, is this, okay? He was also didn't he also play as well as coach at the same time? I believe he did. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe there was
right
something in regards to what he did as
right.
a coach to be able to play simultaneously.
Right.
And to honest with you, that's unheard of in today's NBA landscape.
That's true.
What we really look at are guys who can be the superstars and be the guys on the court that these younger guys really need to have. LeBron James, I use a good classic example of a guy who could eventually make a fantastic head coach. Hence the word could. Doesn't mean he will, doesn't mean he wants to, he just could. And the fact alone that Bill Russell had some leaders on that team, it's almost like saying Michael Jordan's better than Kobe Bryant. Okay, first, they were best friends. Right. Second of all, they were generational players. So to try to compare one to the other doesn't quite work out. But in a coaching and player standpoint, in this conversation, I think Bill Russell by far a much better player, and probably would have been better off staying out of the coaching realm, to be quite honest with you. And there are lots of other guys who can attest to that as well.
Yeah, and I can too. I think you're right. I guess my point is it's all about egos, Rudy. Sometimes guys think that they're so great, they expect players, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I'm going to give you a few other examples, okay? Larry Bird had 3 fine seasons with the Indiana Pacers. His record was 147-67 with a 687 mark. Took the Pacers to an NBA Finals. Of course, it didn't hurt to have Rick Carlisle as his assistant. So, and the one thing I can say about Larry Bird, and I met him, and I talked to him when I was covering a beat writer for the Detroit Pistons, is Larry Bird was one of those individuals who's the most even-keeled, level-headed superstar you will ever meet, Rudy. Okay, he is. So therefore, he didn't have an ego. His players performed well. Didn't hurt to have good assistants around. You always got to have good assistants. So he's one of those rare birds that actually was a great player that had great success. And the other ones I'm going to mention to you momentarily is they don't come very often. So I give Larry Bird a passing grade in that department.
Well, you talk about birds of a different feather. Larry Bird did absolutely fantastic, not only as a Celtics player, but he did also very well. And what we're not putting into consideration, that he was an executive for Indiana for a very long time, 14 years. In fact, he did a lot with a lot less as a head coach from '87 to 2000. This team was always over 500. He always made it a concerted effort to be that guy who would need you to put on a spit shield, just like guys like Bill Cowher and lots of other guys throughout the sporting world that would need you to put on a spit guard to protect your eyes from being gouged with flying secrets. So at the end of the day, I think Larry Bird showed exactly why Indiana needed him as a coach, and of course, he's probably the exception, but not the rule. When you're talking about guys like Bird, who did it as a player, a coach, and an executive, that's like the trifecta that I think a lot of people aspire to. Magic Johnson tried that for the LA Lakers. Didn't quite work out the way. Matter of fact, it ended up in a dumpster fire, and I forgot my marshmallows. But at the end of the day, when you look at this situation between Larry Bird and the Pacers, it was a match made in heaven.
Thanks for bringing up Magic Johnson, because you took the words out of my mouth, and that's not easy to do. So let me validate your Magic Johnson argument by saying that he was all of 5-11 with a 313 percentage in 1993-94, and obviously that definitely didn't work out. The only thing I'll say about 313 is 313 is the area code of the Detroit area, but certainly not an area code you want to have in the coaching ranks at 313 when you're such a 5'11". But Magic Johnson was definitely not coaching material. So now that you've taken Johnson and Bird out of the equation, and of course Bill Russell, there only leads me to one name, and that being this, Rudy, Jason Kidd. 44-38 1 year with the Brooklyn Nets, and then of course with the Milwaukee Bucks he went on to coach 4+ seasons. His overall record was 183-190 with a 491 winning percentage in 373 games. Again, another great player, subpar 500 record, and now he's an assistant coach for the LA Lakers. What are your thoughts about Jason Kidd, Rudy?
Jason Kidd was always a guy who was the slasher, the one to get inside of the lane. He did everything that he could. The problem is that he too is not head coaching material, just like Magic Johnson's not head coaching material. He's 183 and 190, didn't exactly go out stellarly, versus guys like Eli Manning, who retired in the NFL from, and having an even-keeled season, almost as if it was 500. The problem with Jason Kidd is that he never really had the locker room as the head coach. Yeah, he may have won one with the Dallas Mavericks, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he was a coach for all the ages, somebody who has the fiber of guys like Phil Jackson and Red Auerbach and even the great Larry Bird, who we just mentioned. To be quite honest with you, they weren't exactly excited to have Jason Kidd. Yeah, he was a player, and there's nothing wrong with being a player, and he did great as a player. But again, another example where a guy fits a player's mentality, player's standpoint, and not everybody can be players' coaches, okay?
Right.
Let's just score that up right now. Why? Because it takes a certain mentality, a certain attitude, a certain type of swag. It really does, in order, and especially in Los Angeles. I don't care if you're talking about the Clippers. I don't care if you're talking about the Chargers or the Rams. And at least we know this: fans will come and sell out Staples Center. Not so much for the Coliseum. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I give Jason Kidd props for the championship he won with the Mavericks. But as far as being an eventual Hall of Fame coach, not even close. Not even close.
Right. All right. I'm going to mention three other coaches, and then we're going that weren't even mentioned here. But we're going to only touch on this briefly. We have a few other things we want to talk about. Okay, Rudy. Lenny Wilkens obviously turned out to be a fine player and a coach. Casey Jones and Jerry Sloan, all three, obviously their wins speak for themselves. And, of course, let's not forget Don Nelson had a pretty good run, too. So when you talk about other players that have marquee names that have done well, they're certainly they're certainly worth noting. The only reason I'm mentioning the other ones, we're talking about superstar players who were not able to carry the clipboard and separate their egos away from their playing days, because we all know that they were true Hall of Famers. So, any thoughts about those other three coaches or four coaches while we go on to something else, Rude Dog?
I'll be honest with you, Lenny Wilkens, and it's said that Seattle does not have a basketball team. So
right.
Seattle wins. If you were looking for the Supersonics to come back, you should write Adam Silver. But at the end of the day, it was 2006-64. He only had 2,310 losses. He had a fantastic career as a coach. He coached the Raptors, the Hawks, the Knicks. He did everything that he could have done as a coach. You're talking about egos. He didn't really have an ego. From what I understand about Lenny Wilkens, he didn't have an ego. Why? Because he recognized that in order to be a great player, great person, great coach, great father, great husband, is because you're able to take that ego and throw it out the window and swallow humility. And he recognized that. He knew that. And you could probably refer to his son, Randy, in regards to, he'd give you a lot more insight than I could in regards to
Right, I'm with you.
But at the end of the day, I think Lenny Wilkens tops my list in regards to one of those coaches who is extremely humble, who did everything right for the right reasons and not because of ego.
Right. And Casey Jones was great in Boston. Jerry Sloan was a legend in Utah. And, of course, Don Nelson. The only thing he didn't do as a coach was win a world championship, but nobody ever downplays the significance what he accomplished as a Celtic. So just bringing those guys out there. But I wanted the focal point to be straight where I believed it needed to be, and that was on Magic, Larry, Bill Russell, and Jason Kidd. We accomplished that objective. Subject number 2, Rudy, and that's Alex Rodriguez. Alex Rodriguez today says about the Houston Astros cheating scandal, you've earned whatever comes your way. And we're talking about a guy that didn't quite play the game clean himself. So what are your thoughts about Alex Rodriguez's comments today, Rudy?
He's a pot calling the kettle black. He needs to just recognize cheat for cheat. This isn't the honest roll. This isn't the way that I'm more than confident Astro fans wanted to go out. Players are certainly still exempt from this situation, and there has not been one, at least not that I know of, that hasn't been beanbagged by their respective location, wherever they're playing their major league spring training camp. And I think everybody in the lineup has been beanbagged. So I'm going to throw a beanbag at Alex Rodriguez only because he's a pot calling the kettle black. He has no business talking about who did what, when, how, and why, when his whole career, well, not his whole career, but a good part of his career had everything to do with cheating. And you can put guys like Mark McGuire in there, Sammy Sosa in there. There's a laundry list, right?
Right.
And I want to add to this for
Sure.
a minute if I could. So now you have Donald Trump. I don't talk about politics, but this is directly related to sports. He's trying to convince Cooperstown to let Pete Rose in. I don't have a dog in the fight. All I know is I look at Alex Rodriguez, I look at his mentality, I look at him trying to say something cheat when in fact he's cheated himself, is a complete cluster. And unless you're someone who's clean, like David Smoltz, you can talk about guys who played this a long time. Even Lenny Dykstra was questioned about his intake of steroids or illegal substances. Lenny Dykstra never took a dime, a drop, a drip, nothing. And for Alex Rodriguez to come out and pop off with this, you're going to get what you pay for kind of mentality. He just needs to just trap it and go with J-Lo on a vacation somewhere in the Bahamas. Because this right here, you've earned all of this. He's the one to talk. Is he going to end up in the Hall of Fame at any point whatsoever? No. And if he does, you better let Pete Rose in at the same time.
Right.
Because cheating is cheating.
I agree. And I got a lot of guys that actually are voters for the Hall of Fame. Let me touch base on it. Thanks for bringing those up. Now I'm going to talk about each and everything you talked about. Let's talk about the President of the United States. For how long, I don't know. TBD on that, okay? We're talking about a guy that, ran the USFL to the ground. Need I say a whole lot more? Probably not, okay? That's item number one. Alex Rodriguez, by the way, if we didn't know, he's a member of the media, so I guess he's paid for his opinions. But I think I can tell you what I think about opinions. Everybody has them, and you fill in the blank. I don't want to go ahead and nail for explicit content on this show, but he gets paid to voice his opinions. In this particular case, I understand his point, but as I would always say, Rudy, consider the source, period. And I agree that if Rodriguez gets in, then you have to let Pete Rose in, and you know full well that I don't think that's going to happen either. So with that said, consider the source, and that's where it goes with Alex Rodriguez. He gets paid like us to go ahead and talk to the media, and that's where his opinions are, and that's where it ends. All right? Now.
Well, and not only that, but that's where they're going to stay.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about Christian Yelich. Okay, and Christian Yelich is going to get paid an awful lot of money for the Milwaukee Brewers. And I mean, a lot of money. $200 million can buy an awful lot in Milwaukee. I don't know if it can buy you a brewery, but it can buy an awful lot. But when you play for the Brewers, okay, then is he worth the amount of money that Milwaukee's prepared to pay him?
I think what's really brewing there are 200 million reasons why they should actually pay him. He's done so much for that franchise. He has done absolutely everything. He's a fantastic outfielder. He's got a heck of a gun. He's a great person. And look at it like this: from a Brewers fan standpoint and perspective, you're probably going to have him for 7 years. 7 years, which is a longer term than any president will ever have served. But 200 million reasons why 7 years is likely? I think it's very likely. Why? Because Yelich has done this year in and year out. And the best part about it is he's only 28. He's 28 years old. He's already won batting titles, Gold Glove Awards, MVP in 2018. How do you not want to keep a guy who brings so much not only to the outfield from an athletic standpoint, but what he does inside of the locker room? What does he do in the dugout? How does he treat people? What's his transparency level? What kind of guy is this? Clearly the kind of guy that you give this kind of money to help your club, to help your organization, to help your fan base, and give them something to believe in, because sadly enough, you're giving up the farm for Christian Yelich, yet the Brewers have okay pieces outside of Yelich to maybe make a run at inside of the National League. So I don't know. I think the jury's still out, and I think I'm going to brew me some coffee to really mull this over to see if it's a good deal or not at the end of it.
Well, what you have to understand is this, Rudy. Ryan Braun's contract comes off the books after this year, number one. Number two, they got a new sponsor for the stadium, which will no longer be Miller Park in due time. And as a result, they have to send a message to the fan base that they're very serious about being able to compete long term. Now, you also have to understand that when you talk about Christian Yelich, people in Milwaukee become nervous that they gave Ryan Braun a couple of contract extensions. He ended up being suspended for steroid use. But you still have to have the face of a franchise. You got Lorenzo Cain there. You have Josh Hader. And I'm sure that there's a bunch of other guys I'm not bringing about up the top. But you have to send a message to them that this is not a 200-year rebuild. And that's what Milwaukee's trying to do. You know, when you look at Ryan Braun, okay, he ended up winning the MVP in 2011, got a second extension for $105 million. And, you know, you have to wonder whether these contracts are very good on the back end. But I think you do have to roll the dice with Yelich. If it weren't for the fact that he got hurt last year and Milwaukee's offense wasn't as good in the postseason as it would have been with him in the lineup, you kind of wonder whether the Washington Nationals would be world champions, knowing that Milwaukee came so close in that series to begin with. So I think you really have to roll the dice with Christian Yelich. He is a fine player, and his skill set's suited for that ballpark anyways. Whether you open the roof or you close the roof, he's certainly been a breath of fresh air in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and he's going to continue being that guy, the staple. And, of course, what didn't really help today in the spring training, I give all the props to all the teams who won today, but to all those that continue to lose, and I'm mentioning the Pirates for one reason, they've won one spring training game. One. They lost back-to-back games, so let me just throw that out there. So, Chicago beats Milwaukee. No big deal. Spring training, call it a day. Yelich is here to stay. He's the impact player. He may not see a ton of time in spring training because you're going to make him the richest player on your roster. And that's okay. If you have that kind of footage, if you have that kind of desire and passion and drive, and you've had multiple conversations with him, his agent, his family, the fan base, this isn't 1960s baseball. This isn't 1970s baseball. This isn't even 1919 baseball, okay? This is about how you as an organization look out for the benefit of your club in the long term by acquiring guys like Yelich. Not only that, but okay, so Ryan Braun, not the poster child that we all thought that he was, and now the guy on the back of the milk carton. Is he going to stick around? Probably. Hader's doing really well for them in addition. And I think, honestly, that this deal with Christian Yelich is really going to kind of scream to the other players. So, you know what? If you want this kind of money, you're going to have to show us something, and consistently so, because Yelich has been doing it since he arrived there.
Well, not only that, you got to understand the point of view in Milwaukee. When they decided to extend Braun, they either had the choice to either keep Prince Fielder or Braun, because they didn't have the financial wherewithal to keep both those two guys. Obviously, Fielder went on to the Detroit Tigers. They did get to a World Series there, so they weren't equipped to handle two big superstars. But you're right, Yelich has been great from the beginning. And again, now the question is, do the Brewers have other pieces like Avisel Garcia? Is he just an average, normal, run-of-the-mill guy? They let Yasmani Grandal go, a good offensive player. Mike Moustakas ended up leaving. But again, baseball's full of additions and subtractions. You really never know what you're going to get. And the best part about baseball is you have 162 games to figure it out. So it's not like you can go ahead and get into the playoffs with a 9-7 mark and make the hottest team get in. That doesn't happen in the great American pastime. It doesn't. So I actually think that Brewers fans are probably excited about the deal, but they also have to look in their rearview mirror wondering, let's just keep our fingers crossed that this doesn't turn out to be another Ryan Braun situation all over again. Though if I had to venture an opinion, I say it's not, because Christian Yelich is a lot better player than Braun. And I don't think that if Braun were to stay anyways, he'd have to take a hometown discount to continue his career in Milwaukee. There's no way he would have ever have survived in New York with the steroid situation being what it was, with the big media market that you have, where he was able to hide behind the small media market that Milwaukee has, and they were able to make the best out of a tough situation. So I love the Yelich deal. I don't know how it'll work out on the back end. I also have to think about Miguel Cabrera of the Tigers. You're getting the guy's best years, but what about the worst years? Albert Pujols is another situation where you pay him a lot of money early. What is it like on the back end? But Milwaukee isn't going to go ahead and attract a lot of big free agents. They're going to have to make sure they make sound trades and convince these guys to stay. like St. Louis, okay? When you go ahead and start bring on certain players, you got to hope that they like playing there and they're willing to stay there. You know where I'm coming from? So you've got to be able to make them feel comfortable. Can't say that was the case of Kawhi Leonard in Toronto. He ended up leaving anyways, but Toronto got what they needed, and that was a world championship. That's another argument for another day. But Dick Vitale always said, you know, when you go to a place like that, you don't, whether the money's a few dollars or not, you just want to be happy where you're at. If that's your comfort zone in a small market and you're a big fish in a small town, there's nothing wrong with that, Rudy. There really isn't.
No, and there never will be, as long as the club itself recognizes the monetary flow, recognizes that you're going to pay the guys who have been there, the guys who have performed. This should be all based on performance, right? So Christian Yelich does more than his share. He has continually done more than his share. But who else is going to step up? And we're not quite sure who's going to be there as far as the roster is concerned. You have Adrian Hauser, Corey Neville, Eric Lauer. You know, these guys are going to be the ones that are going to have to really step up. And, of course, we don't know who's going to start, what opening day is going to look like throughout Major League Baseball. But I think when you look at all the teams, you have to put the best talent out there. Now, don't forget, what we don't really talk about is the farm system and the farm league and how that's so sustainable to the active Major League Baseball rosters throughout the Major League Baseball landscape. To be quite honest, those are the ones that feed these these single A professional, clubs with the arsenal and the types of things that won the Washington Nationals their first title. So we always have to look at that aspect as well. What are these guys getting paid? Well, I'll tell you what. Right now, their pay in AA and AAA is being bumped up. They're actually getting more money.
Right.
Is that going to trickle over to other professional sports? Well, we don't know. But Major League Baseball certainly did their absolute best to make sure that these guys are being at least more so closely compensated for their performance, which may not be the equivalent. They're not going to be in the big ballparks. They're not going to have the major TV contracts. They're not going to have certain amenities and things of that nature that guys who play with the Brewers and the Pirates and the Angels and the Dodgers, they're not going to have what these guys have. But if you rise to the occasion and be that guy to stand out on that roster, you'll be sure to be on the starting roster on opening day. That is exactly why you play the game.
Well, in the Milwaukee Brewers case, you never know what you're getting from year to year. You just got to hope that your core players are good players and that they stay healthy during the course of that marathon. And that's what the Brewers are faced with year in and year out as they continue to make, decisions about who to keep, who they can keep, who they want to acquire, and put the pieces of the puzzle together. It's not like the Tampa Bay Rays where if somebody leaves, you bring in a few veterans and your farm system is off the charts. That's a different animal. Every organization is built much differently. And our last subject of the night goes to a sport we're all too familiar with. That's Russell Okun being traded, I think, the Chargers to the Carolina. You wanted to talk about it? Go ahead and take the lead on this one. What are the details of potentially what could take place?
Well, we don't really know the details yet. That probably is not going to be seen until the NFL season begins, and that's going to happen later on this month. However, I do know this, that Okun was in line to be traded. I don't know what the details are financially. I don't think anybody knows. I don't even think there's any news out there in regards to what those numbers look like. But the Chargers are selling Russell Okun to Carolina in swap for Trey Turner, who's going over to the LA Chargers. Both of these guys are stellar in their respective positions. The difference is that in 2019, the pulmonary embolism that Okun was plagued with kept him off the field for quite a while. First half of the season, I might add, and then a groin injury. He's had a lot of absolutely horrible things transpire to him. However, the Carolina Panthers seen a reason to make this trade. Why? Because they need better protection. They need a guy who's a little bit more mobile. And I think Russell Okun, who's a two-time Pro Bowler, gives Carolina that kind of protection. We don't know who's starting under center for Carolina. That's still a huge mystery right now. I don't want it to be Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton should be traded as well, but that's my opinion. But if for some reason Cam does, that will protect any quarterback under center. And if Cam Newton started, so be it. So Cam Newton will have that kind of protection on his blind side, disabling him from getting hit and nailed. And of course, we know better than anybody, he's been injured wide event, and I think you probably rank him up there with injuries. Speaking about Cam Newton, in relation to where Ben Roethlisberger was injured, nose, elbow, shoulder, knee, ankle, and it's very consistent. So I don't know what Carolina's seen, but obviously enough to make this trade happen. So Russell Okung headed over to the Carolina Panthers from Los Angeles, and then Trey Turner goes over to Los Angeles. I think that Carolina probably gets the better end of this deal, so as long as Russell Okung stays healthy. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a viable component on that line and can really help out Carolina for years to come.
Okay, and finally, before we get to some of our other business, okay, why don't you give me some final takes of the NFL Scouting Combine?
You know, the NFL Combine, sadly enough, I could not make it. I could not make it to Indianapolis. It had nothing to do with the weather, so it wasn't whether or not I can get there. I think that you're going to find a lot of draft picks who are going to go to their respective locations. Now, you can put in Mel Kiper's analysis. You can put in, anybody's analysis you want in regards to who goes where, when, how, and why. We don't know. We suspect that Redskins going to take guys like Chase Young because he's going to be there for at least 10 years, minimum. So as long as Dan Snyder doesn't write and inks him correctly. And, of course, you see nothing but great stuff out of Ohio State from Chase Young. He's one of those get-in-your-face kind of guys who does not give up on the player. Reminds me of Devin Bush, who came out of Michigan. Did great things for the Steelers last year. And I think Chase Young will do that, will be that pass rusher that the Redskins have needed for years, to be quite honest with you. In regards to Tua Tagovailoa, that's still kind of up in the air. I'm still concerned about his medical. Whether or not Miami's that concerned, I don't know. And to be quite honest with you, Miami's kind of a duster fire when it comes to who's going to start under center because they don't really have a quarterback. And yes, they're going to rely on the old man to get it done. He's been around a long time, and at moments Fitzpatrick looked like that guy, and then other times he looked like a complete dumpster fire, and that had a lot to do with that offensive line. Of course, they need help there as well. There's just so many great things. Joe Burrow, always in the conversation. He came out recently saying, look, you don't compare me to Tom Brady. I'm my own person, my own entity. I'm going to do what I got to do. He was limited. He didn't do a whole lot there. But there's a lot of things that I did like. Offensive linemen were off the charts as far as the 40s concerned. Everybody performed relatively well. I don't know that there's one person who stands out to me, somebody who flopped like a fish out of water. Guys that were invited, maybe guys that didn't show up. But if you didn't show up, that's it's kind of sad. But, it is what it is. So I think overall it was absolutely fantastic. Looking at Tua, looking at Nate Stanley out of Iowa, Shea Patterson, another guy out of Michigan, another quarterback that teams, if the Dolphins were smart, what they would do is they would trade down and get some offensive line pieces, grab a quarterback. I think Shea Patterson may be there. If that is their guy, he's got a great arm. He's got great throw in motion. I like his mentality. I like his swag. The only problem is that the Dolphins organization hasn't always made the right decisions and the best type of call when it comes to draft picks. But I think overall, Coleman was a huge success. I wish these guys nothing but absolute great things moving forward into the NFL.
Yeah, I think the only riddle I have about the Miami Dolphins, Rudy, is the fact that Josh Rosen was a guy they traded for a year ago, and I'm kind of wondering where he'll wind up next. I guess we'll find that out at some point or other. I still think he could be a good prospect. He just needs to be in a situation where the coaches and the management believe in him. And one would have thought the Cardinals obviously brought in Kyler Murray, and then, of course, moved on from him, and now Miami, you thought Rosen would get a fair chance. That didn't quite work out. I only wish Josh well to see where he winds up, but I can, so it'll be interesting to see what the Dolphins do with the quarterback situation. I like Shea Patterson. I saw him play against Alabama, and, coming from Jim Harbaugh, he's progressed in the past couple of years. And Michael Keller, one of my regular guests here on the Sports Exchange, has nothing but high praises for Shea Patterson as well. And Michael Keller is one of the best Michigan Wolverines of all time, played for the Maize and Blue many, many years. he evaluated talent for the XFL, you name it. He was a talent evaluator. If Michael Keller says that Shea Patterson, Rudy, is a good prospect, I believe that what he's saying is right, and I believe what you're saying is on target. So with that said, let's talk about tomorrow's edition of Motorman and Rude Dog. What do you have on tap for us?
Well, there's a lot of things going on right now. You guys are supposed to follow at Take No Punches. I'll talk a little bit more about the NFL. I want to kind of dive into some NBA. Who's leading Western Conference, Eastern Conference? Who's your potential MVP vote? Rookie of the Year. We're going to have that conversation. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about baseball because, as we know, and it seems to be a hot topic everywhere, I don't care who you are or where you stand, the Astros continue to not look at players. And hopefully I'll be able to acquire a guest to come in to talk about it. So that's what's on tap. Again, those that follow I Take No Punches is going to be a great show. Like it, love it, never leave it, share it, because we like that kind of thing. And just check us out tomorrow, so stay tuned for that.
So what guests are you going to have on with me and you on the show, Rude Dog? I'm anxious to see.
You're going to have to find out.
Oh, come on, really? So you mean to tell me tomorrow's show is going to be a 3-ring circus with myself, you, and somebody else? Is that right?
It's quite possible, but I can... Okay, look, I'll give you a hint. Even if you don't know who this is, I'll give you a hint. He played for the Mets, he played for the Phillies, and he's an older fella, and he no longer plays in Major League Baseball. So I'll leave that to your demise and let you figure that out.
My demise? What are you talking about, my demise? Are you talking about my curiosity, demise? You need to get Webster's dictionary out there to make sure that we're on target with these adjectives, nouns, and verbs, and all that business.
Yeah, get right on it.
Yeah, all right. Meanwhile, you can reach a Tribune on Twitter at Tribune South. And also my personal page is Scoop, SCOOP. And if you can count 5 fingers or on your hand, that's how many threes you got. Scoop with 33333. And that's how you can reach us. Rudy, go ahead and give them a shout out how they can reach you on social media.
No, you can go to Rude Dog Reyes. You go to the RudeDogShow.com. Check out all kinds of great stuff. And yeah, let me follow on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook as well.
Now you have the Rude Dog Show on Sundays. Any you want to tell anybody who you plan on bringing on this Sunday?
I'm gonna leave that a secret for now.
You see, Rudy, I got news for you. You got more darn secrets than politicians tell lies. Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, you'd have to really go really deep.
You're just gonna have to tune in to find out.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, though, we're gonna have an action-packed show tomorrow, aren't we, Motorman and Rude Dog? Is that correct?
That's going to be fun. Yep, you got it.
And you can also... And I want everybody to know in our audience, okay, feel free to go to the South Florida Tribune, www.southfloridatribune.com. Rudy Reyes does a heck of a job helping us get the word out there. We have a lot of great content from our affiliates, our regular writers, as well as our broadcast session. So on behalf of Rudy Reyes, my co-host on tonight's edition of the Sports Exchange, you can find it under the great Coaches ? Episode. My name is Scott Morganroth, wishing you a good night, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow on Motorman and Rude Dog. Good night, everybody.